Hey everyone. So as promised, this is just a little video to go over kind of the requirements for this week's assignment and say a little bit more about JSON and show you a couple of examples, show you an example so you have an idea of how this is used out in the world. So as we discussed, JSON is a way of encoding data, usually data that is delivered over the internet. And there are a lot of cases why you might want to do that. Partly because you can just see it on a web page, which is handy, but it's particularly efficient for dealing with data that is updated on a regular basis, often in real time. So the example that we're going to look at in a few minutes is the city bike data. But this applies to any API, application programming interface. So when you interface with data from, for example, social media platforms, you're querying for a hashtag, this is going to give you a way to access that information that is both more comprehensive, because usually more data is available via APIs as a JSON format, and that is going to be much easier to parse and do analysis on, right? So you wouldn't want to kind of be copying and pasting things off of a web page when you could get them in a structured format like JSON that can then be processed directly by other programs. So as I said, part of the idea here is just to sort of get our feet wet. This is the example that is on the kind of descriptor page that I provided you with. Now, I know that this is probably not that illustrative in terms of what we might actually use JSON for. So I'll just show you an example from City Bike. So City Bike, I'm sure you're all familiar with. Happily provides data, access to data about the City Bike system. They provide it both retrospectively and in real time. So what we have here is, we have one option, which is City Bike trip history. So these are CSV files, actually, that include data, this is zipped, obviously compressed data, of City Bike usage for like every City Bike ride that's taken within a given month. And you can tell that they're month because of the way that they're named. This is a really common thing to see a sort of year, month, even day format. We're not going to be looking at that yet, or we're not going to be looking at data like that yet. But again, just to give you an example of the real-time data that you can get. So this is an interesting thing. So what I've clicked on here is a link that was provided. It says get the GBFS. GBFS is specifically the general bike share feed specification. Okay, so it's yet another format that apparently was designed just for bike share information, because City Bike is obviously one of many types of bike shares in regions around the world, and so what it does is it's actually linking me directly to a JSON document. So hopefully you can see this reasonably well. I can't really increase the URL font size, but if you see it ends in .json. And if you look at this, you'll see very clearly that it is in the format that we described, where it begins with the curly braces. We see on the left are our properties or keys. Okay, keys as in like this is the name, the key to the value, and the value is on the right-hand side. Numbers, as you can see, don't absolutely have to be enclosed in double quotations, but it's a good idea to just enclose everything in double quotations. So what we're seeing here is, and you see how they're using the underscores on the left-hand side. So again, the keys are on the left. Those should always have underscores. They should never have any sort of special characters or spaces in them. So if you want to have something that has two words, just use an underscore between them. It's a nice way to keep it readable while also adhering to that requirement. We can talk about why you don't want to have those special characters in our next meeting. So this is saying last updated. This is, believe it or not, a timestamp. This is probably a number of seconds from January 1st. 1970. We can talk about why that is as well. The TTL is actually an acronym that means time to live. 10, which I think in this case is either 10 seconds or 10 milliseconds. Again, doesn't provide units here, and this is again one of the reasons why when we're working with data, the data itself is never enough, because there's questions like this, like TTL is in what units? We don't know. So, but what this is providing is saying this is in English. These are the various feeds that are available. Again, it's not that laid out very nicely on this web page. It's one of the reasons why we have things like JSON lint. So I'm going to actually just copy this. Okay, so I'm just literally highlighting it in my browser. I'm using a controller Apple C, and I'm going to move over to JSON lint here, which you can find at just jsonlint.com. and I'm going to paste it in, and when I click validate JSON, one of the nice things it's going to do is it's actually going to format this for me, so it's much more readable. So formatting, I think you're going to talk about typography with Rosalie a little bit. We'll address it very briefly too, but typography is incredibly important because it is a way of giving visual priority to information. And the typography and the layout of JSON documents is a really important key to their legibility, to their readability. Now it's much easier for me to see what's going on. So what I have is I have two, what I would call, this is my term, I call them these top level key value pairs. Okay, so again, the key is whatever's on the left, the value is whatever is on the right of the colon. You can see that they're always separated by commas. Okay, I have that, and then I have the key is data, and you see that on the right-hand side, I just have this curly brace. Well, that curly brace is an object, and an object can contain lists, other objects, or individual key value pairs, okay? So when we have something that we want to describe that's more complex than just a single value, we have to use a curly brace because that's how we denote that it's an object. So it can get a little bit, this is why I recommended the strategy that I articulated at the end of class today of kind of pairing up my braces in the beginning and then filling the data in between them so that I make sure that things are matched. Otherwise, you can see that we have a lot of levels of what we call nesting here, and it's a little difficult to kind of understand, like, okay, this brace would match to this brace, I guess. It's a little bit tricky. So the value in this case for the data key is actually an object whose first key, right, is EN, English. And inside that English key is the value feeds. And the feeds has a value, is a list. And I know it's a list because of that square bracket. That's the only thing that I need to see in order to know that this is in fact, I'm going to just zoom this in a little bit, that this is in fact a list. So what kinds of things do we put in lists? We put things that are of the different instances of the same type of thing, right? So in this case, each of these is a feed, so it's natural that it appears in a list. What you'll notice about these list items, and each item is encased in curly braces, right? Because it's multiple key value pairs. Each pair is separated by a comma, except for the last one, okay? And then each item in the list has a comma between itself and the next item, again, except for the last one, right? So think of your English sentence conventions here. If you're making a list of something, you have commas between every item, but you don't put a comma after the last one. It's the exact same thing here. So what we're seeing here is the different data feeds that the City Bike system offers. And it's giving you the name, so it's a descriptor. And it's giving you the URL, what's the actual web location. So we have system alerts, regions, system information, station status, and station information. So here, I think system information is the one that is kind of most handy. So I'm literally just going to copy this out and paste it into a bar. No, that's actually not useful. So let's try again. Right, I mean, there's obviously data there, right, but it's not very interesting. There's station status, I think. Let's try station status, okay? So, yeah, okay, this is better. Okay, so again, a lot of data here. What you can hopefully start to see as you look at this is we have this last updated parameter. So it's saying this is the time that it was last updated. This is good for, let's say, 10 seconds. And then it's saying, okay, stations, and stations is a list, okay? And within that list, there are individual objects. Okay, and it looks like, for example, that is a single object. So I've highlighted a single object. So it's given a station ID. So again, key value pairs. In this case, it's just each station object is actually just a series of key value pairs. The first is the station ID, which is a number, 72, the number of bikes that are currently available, disabled, the number of docks available in which to return a bike, number of disabled docks. I'm not sure what is installed stands for. Again, that's something where we'd have to talk to somebody and say, well, what does that mean? Is renting? Dunno. Is returning? Dunno. Last reported, this is actually, again, this is a timestamp And I don't know what 8D has available keys means either, right? So we're able to understand a reasonable amount about what's happening in this data set just by looking at this. And that's important. One of the things about JSON documents is that we want them to be descriptive. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to make sure that our keys give a reader, right, an idea of what the value means, right? So the term station ID doesn't have to be station ID. It could be ABCDFG, and then given a value of 72, and someone somewhere might know that that actually means station ID, but that's not going to be very helpful to the person who's reading this document. So as you think about creating your own documents, you want to make sure that the keys that you choose, the things that appear on the left, are descriptive. Okay, that's a really important part of this. Now, just again to illustrate that, the purpose of this. So we see this timestamp, this last reported 1516 and ends at 0872. If I were to refresh this, I get a totally different. Actually, I don't get a number on that, but I do get a different number on the last reported. So I'm obviously only looking at one station in this case of hundreds of stations that exist in New York City. And in this case, it looks like station 72 hasn't had any activity. There's still the same number of bikes available. This will probably change in an hour or two. If I were to look at this, this will probably be changing every couple of minutes, right? During rush hour, you see a lot of activity on these. Who uses this? Well, first of all, we could use this, right? We might use this to monitor, to develop a profile of the city bike activity at a certain intersection. Maybe that might not be of use. Might not be of particular interest to us in this moment, but the principle is there. JSON feeds are available for all kinds of information, and what's great about them is that, again, they're very low weight. In other words, they are, they're text-based, they're easy to process, they're relatively easy to read, even for a human. You can quickly kind of get a sense of what's in the data set. And if you want to start building your own archive of real-time information, you can do that. It's, again, just a really useful data type to know how to work with. So we are going to start building our own JSON file. So the way that I'm going to do this is I have decided that I'm going to make mine about books. And so as I suggested, I'm literally going to start right now. The very first thing in any JSON document is a pair of curly braces. That's how I let the internet and the world know that this is JSON. Other than ending it, I can optionally end it in a .json extension. I don't have to, but it's handy. And so I'm going to start here, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to call mine books. I'm going to do mine about books. And, I should probably save it. So I'm going to go ahead and, so I'm going to call this, and I actually want to make sure that even this is descriptive, right? So I'm going to call this booklist.json, and I'm going to save it on my desktop. There we go. And actually, I happen to be using, this is a program called gedit. I'm actually on a Linux Ubuntu operating system. And you can see that it actually highlights and understands what JSON is. This probably won't be the case for you if you're working on your desktop in TextEdit or something like that, but that's fine. I mean, this is just sort of an extra boost. I could also do this directly in JSON-lint. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and just do it on my text editor, and then I'm going to sort of stop and check at different points throughout. Okay, so I've started with books, and now inside books, I'm going to put the owner is going to be me. It's my uni, and so I've decided that I'm going to have that my file is about books. What's the information that I want to record about that? Well, who owns them? And I'm also going to put the, actually I could do it this way. I'm not formatting it here precisely the way that it's going to be formatted in JSON-lint. That's okay, because as I go along, I will continue to do that. And in fact, I violated my own principle here, which is that I now have two curly braces open, so I need two curly braces closed, right? And so I'm going to say genre is poetry, right? And whoops, okay. And now I'm going to create another one. I'm going to say, I'm just going to call this, I'll call it volumes, right? These are my volumes of poetry. Okay, so now my volumes of poetry is going to be my list. Now remember that a list I denote with square braces, okay? So now what I have, I can actually do this, by the way, this is perfectly legal to have an empty list. So when I use those square braces, the signal I'm sending is I'm saying there's a list of things here, but lists can have no items, right? We can just say there will be a list there, or I can use this as a placeholder. So what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna highlight this whole thing, I'm gonna copy it, I'm gonna jump over to JSON lint. Okay, I'm just gonna replace what's here, and I'm gonna test this right away, okay? So you can see that it doesn't really care about additional white space, so I can have extra carriage returns in there. It's not going to fix those for me. But if I had, say, done this all in one line, this is actually perfectly legal. It is not white space dependent, so it doesn't actually, the program, although in this case, the computer is extremely anal retentive as a copy editor, except for white space. So it doesn't mind about indentations and spaces and things like that. It can read this perfectly well, but this is considered proper format, okay? And again, proper formatting of this stuff is not something that you're gonna do manually. Very much. You can see that I sort of tend to do it out of habit because it makes it more readable, but you can always rely on a program like JSON, you know, a website like JSON Lint, and there are programs that will actually apply this formatting for you. So don't worry too much about that in real time, but keep in mind that working kind of inside the JSON Lint window is a really handy way to make sure that you know how you're doing. Now, easy ways that this could go wrong. I forgot a comma. Boom. So down here you can see it saying, hey, there's a parse error. Parse error means I don't know what's going on. That's a computer saying, I'm confused. But it is giving us some clues, okay? So it's saying parse error on line 4, so it's telling us which line it's confused about. And then it's saying, well, I'm expecting I could get any number, any one of these things, but I got string. And when they say string, they mean it got this thing volumes, right? And the reason why is because it's missing that delimiting character. It's missing that comma there. Once I add the comma back in, everything's fine. But just to point out, just to sort of reiterate or emphasize my earlier point, I'll continue to have this problem if I have missing characters. So this is one of the reasons why trying this stuff out and then going away from it and coming back and taking another look is really important, because especially as we sort of get further in, once you've been spending some time on something, it's often very difficult to see simple errors, right? And that's one of the skills that you'll hone, is just the ability to see these little details. So I've decided I'm doing books. I am the owner. The genre is poetry. And now each book is going to be its own object, right? Because it's going to have multiple properties. I want to record more than one piece of information about each one. But again, I'm going to start with the first one. And for the first one, I will simply create the curly braces, and the first property that I'm going to give it is the title. Okay, so this is a and again, I'm not going to worry too much. So I'm giving it the title. What's the title of the book? Who's the author? Is Maya Angelou, and I'll give it publication year is 1978. Okay, so I kind of just, oops, not doing that. Kind of just, bang that all out. But again, what you see is that in each case, I have a key, a property or key, and the value. It's always wrapped in, every piece is wrapped in double quotation marks. Every time there's more than one thing within a list or an object, there's a comma, except for the last item. So again, I'm just going to go validate the JSON. Looks okay. So now if I'm like, okay, I've made one successfully, I've made one item successfully, what I like to do is just copy it. So I'm literally going to copy this. Okay, I'm going to put some space in here. I'm going to add my comma because I know that there's going to be a comma. whoops, did I delete something? Yeah, I did delete something. Okay. And I'm going to paste that copy in again. And now my task is much easier. I can check that the 2 works just as well as the 1. And I can just worry about changing the values because, again, this is a list of similar items, right? This is a list of poetry volumes. So I'm going to record the same attributes, right, about each one in my list. So I'm not going to have title, author, and publication year for one, and then title, author, and chapter list for another, right? They're going to be uniform in what the keys are, but then the values will be different. And so now I can say, whoops. And so now I can say something like Norton Anthology, right? And go on. I always do that. I have a compulsive, like, Apple S to save because I like saving my progress, and so on and so forth. Okay, and so I might even make this not. I'll just call it 2007. Okay, so so this is exactly what you all are going to do. You're going to you can construct this in a text file or directly in JSON lint if you prefer. You're going to have at least what I call 2 top-level key value pairs. So for me, that is each of these. Sorry, in my case, that's owner and genre. Okay, yours should be different. Okay, so if you're going to make a list of T's, then instead of books, you would say T's. Might say, you know, in NYC might be the T's that you have in New York City, and the genre might be something else. I don't know, loose leaf teas, right? So just pick something in your life and go with it. And what you're going to do again is you're going to make at least 2 top-level key value pairs. You're going to have a list of at least 3 items long with at least 3 keys, right? So distinct descriptors like title, author, and publication year. 3 keys or attributes for each item within your list, okay? So all of that's going to be detailed on Courseworks. If you have any questions, please post them. And to submit this, I'm just going to copy it out of JSON lint once everything is looking good. Obviously, this isn't quite complete. I don't have quite the right number of items, but I'm just going to come back here, paste it in. I'll save this either as a .txt or a .json. Either is fine for me, and I'm going to upload it to the assignment on Courseworks. Okay? Great. Looking forward to seeing you all next week.